Some transgressions shatter trust so completely that forgiveness feels impossible, leaving us to navigate the complex emotional landscape of setting boundaries without bitterness. Today's story explores how one woman gracefully severed ties, protected her peace, and moved forward when reconciliation wasn't an option, choosing self-preservation over forced absolution. This is the story of Annette, and the day she learned that not every bridge burned is a failure of character. Annette and Marva had been best friends since college, the kind of friendship that felt like sisterhood. For 23 years, they'd stood beside each other through everything: Annette's mother's death, Marva's divorce, career changes, heartbreaks. They were each other's emergency contact. Their children grew up together, their families vacationed as one unit. When people spoke of Annette, they mentioned Marva in the same breath, and vice versa. Annette had been married to Jack for 18 years. Not a perfect marriage, but a solid one, built on trust, shared dreams, and the life they'd created with their 2 teenage daughters, Yvonne and Thelma. Jack was a good provider, an involved father, and for nearly 2 decades, Annette believed she knew him completely. Paul was Marva's brother, recently separated from his wife. He'd been staying with Marva while sorting out his divorce, and naturally became part of their extended friend group. It felt seamless, comfortable, the way family should feel: group dinners, game nights, weekends spent together. The 6 of them, Annette, Jack, Marva, Paul, and sometimes the girls, had fallen into an easy rhythm. What Annette didn't know was that for 8 months, Jack had been having an affair with Marva, not just any affair. They'd been intimate in Annette's home, in the guest room where Marva stayed during their girls' weekends. They exchanged messages while sitting across from Annette at dinner. Marva helped plan Annette's 45th birthday party while sleeping with her husband. They laughed at inside jokes Annette didn't understand, touched hands under the table when they thought no one was looking, and built a secret world right in front of her face. The discovery came through the most mundane of ways: a forgotten phone, an unlocked message thread, and a heart-stopping moment when Annette realized the 2 people she trusted most in the world had been betraying her in the cruelest way imaginable. The messages weren't just about the affair. They were about her. Jokes about how trusting she was, how naive, how she'd never suspect a thing. They'd turned her kindness into a punchline, her loyalty into a weakness. When Annette confronted Jack, he didn't crumble. He didn't beg. He looked at her with something close to annoyance and said, "We didn't mean to hurt you. We fell in love. These things happen. You'll understand eventually. You're a reasonable person." As if her pain was an inconvenience, as if love justified cruelty. Marva was worse. When Annette called her, there was a long pause before Marva said, "I know this is hard, but I need you to understand. What Jack and I have is real. We can all be adults about this. The girls need us both in their lives. We can work through this as a family." She actually expected Annette to understand, to make room for her betrayal, to manage everyone's emotions while her own world was collapsing. Neither offered genuine remorse. Both wanted Annette's blessing, her understanding, her forgiveness, as if their convenience mattered more than her devastation, as if she owed them grace after they'd shown her none. Paul, Marva's brother, tried to play mediator. He showed up at Annette's door with that concerned expression people wear when they're about to ask you to be smaller so others can be comfortable. "Annette, I know my sister. She never meant for this to happen. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive? You're a Christian woman. Isn't that what you're supposed to do?" He actually said that, as if her faith was a weapon to beat her with, as if forgiveness was something she owed on demand. Even Yvonne and Thelma, her own daughters, were initially confused. Marva had gotten to them first, planting seeds of doubt. "Aunt Marva said you're not being fair, Mom. She said you're making this harder than it needs to be. She said Dad's really sorry, and you won't even talk to them. Her children looking at her like she was the problem. That's when Annette realized something profound. She didn't owe anyone forgiveness, not because she was bitter, not because she couldn't move forward, but because some boundaries are sacred and some violations are permanent. Forgiveness isn't a performance you owe to people who are still making excuses. It's not a gift you give to make others comfortable with the harm they caused. She made her decisions with clarity. To Jack, she said, "I'm filing for divorce. You'll communicate through lawyers. You're the father of my children, so we'll co-parent civilly, but our relationship ends here. I don't need your explanations, your justifications, or your version of closure. This marriage is over," she said it once, calmly, and never repeated herself. To Marva, she offered complete silence. No confrontation, no explanation, no final conversation where Marva could twist things or play victim. Annette blocked her number, removed her from social media, and instructed her daughters that Marva was no longer welcome in their home. When Marva sent letters, long, rambling justifications about fate and true love and how hurt she was by Annette's coldness, Annette returned them unopened. Every single one. To Paul, when he showed up again with more appeals to her supposed Christian duty, she said simply, "Your sister made her choices. You can support her if you wish, but you don't get to guilt me into performing forgiveness for your comfort. Stay out of this." And when he tried to argue, she closed the door, gently, finally. To her daughters, when they were ready to hear it, she said, "Some people will tell you that forgiveness is always the answer. But forgiveness is for when someone acknowledges harm, shows genuine remorse, and changes. What your father and Marva did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice they made repeatedly for 8 months while looking me in the eye and calling themselves family. I'm not holding on to bitterness. I'm holding on to my dignity. There's a difference. I don't need to forgive people who aren't sorry. I just need to stop letting them have access to my peace." Yvonne cried when she finally understood. Thelma got angry at her father, at Marva, at the injustice of adults expecting children to manage their messes. But both girls watched their mother navigate the aftermath with a strength that taught them more than any lecture ever could. 6 months later, Jack and Marva were together, living in a condo across town, frustrated that Annette refused to be reasonable about including Marva at family events. They actually expected her to sit across from them at Yvonne's graduation, at Thelma's birthday, at holidays, as if enough time could erase what they'd done, as if Annette's healing required her participation in their comfort. Paul stopped trying to mediate after Annette calmly told him one final time, "Your sister's feelings are not my responsibility. Neither are yours. I'm not angry. I'm just done." Something in her tone made him realize she meant it. This wasn't a woman who needed to be convinced. This was a woman who'd already made peace with her decision. Yvonne and Thelma, after seeing their father's true character emerge during the divorce, the manipulation, the minimizing, the way he tried to rewrite history, understood their mother's choice. They stopped questioning why she wouldn't forgive. They started questioning why anyone expected her to. Annette built a new life. She didn't date for a while, didn't need to. She focused on her daughters, her work, her garden. She took a solo trip to Italy, something she'd always wanted to do. She joined a book club. She started painting again, something she'd abandoned years ago. She discovered that freedom wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about refusing to accept less than she deserved. She didn't forgive Jack. She didn't forgive Marva. But she also didn't carry rage. The anger had its moment, burned hot and clean, and then faded into something quieter, a boundary, not a burden. She simply walked away with her peace intact, understanding that some people don't deserve access to your healing. Some people lose the right to your grace when they choose cruelty over character. People in their circle called her cold, others called her strong. A few whispered that she was being dramatic, that affairs happen, that she should think of the children and find a way to be civil with Marva for everyone's sake. Annette called herself free, because forgiveness, she learned, is not a debt you owe to people who never asked for it, especially when they're still making excuses, still expecting you to minimize your pain so they can maximize their comfort. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not forgive. Sometimes it's simply to stop participating in your own betrayal, to recognize that you are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm, to understand that boundaries are not punishment, they're protection, and that walking away from people who treat your heart like a revolving door isn't bitterness, it's wisdom. Annette learned that not every relationship needs closure. Some need distance. Some need to be left in the past where they belong, without ceremony, without explanation, without the performance of forgiveness that benefits everyone except the person who was hurt. And that's not failure, that's freedom. Not every bridge burned is a failure of character. Sometimes it's the only way to stop people from using it to invade your peace. Annette didn't need to forgive to be free. She just needed to understand that her dignity wasn't negotiable, and that some people don't deserve access to her heart, no matter how long they once held a key. Forgiveness is grace, but boundaries are sacred. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away, not in anger, not in vengeance, but in absolute certainty that you deserve better. Some relationships don't need closure, they need distance, and that's not bitterness, that's wisdom.